My name is Thomas Stahl, and I am the CEO and founder of DTS Global. I'm also one of its primary partners, and I just want to take a moment to thank the city of Creswell for giving us this opportunity. We're really looking forward to collaborating with the city and to bring you a strategic business plan. My background, I've been in the nuclear industry for about 30 years. I've also worked for various governmental agencies such as the General Services Administration, the Treasury, the Department of Public Health and Services. In the nuclear industry, we're highly regulated, and I think this is very important because I have pretty much been in any type of investigation that the nuclear industry has to offer, from root cause analysis to causal factors to human performance reviews. And we have to be very strict in these investigations so we actually understand what the problem is and come up with the correct solutions. Obviously, in the nuclear industry, as well as many of the various government agencies, we can't afford to come up with solutions that don't work. Now, recently, the city of Creswell has put out an RFP that wanted a contractor or vendor such as myself to come in and assist the city in putting together a strategic business plan. Now, while a strategic business plan can be complex, that does not mean that they're complicated. What I mean by that is you're going to have a mission statement, you're going to have your vision statement, probably going to put out some of the values that the city holds dear, within the organization, within the city. And then you're going to want to get down to goals and objectives. What does the city want to accomplish over a period of time? And then the objectives, how is the city going to accomplish those goals? But before we put those goals and objectives into place, we really have to do an exam of the city, if you will, and understand how the city organization is currently functioning. Meaning we can't just dream up goals and objectives and hope that they're going to be achievable in a certain period of time. We've got to actually make sure that any barriers that might be already in place that would prevent the city from reaching those goals, that those barriers are removed. And I kind of liken it as to a doctor's exam. You go to the doctor, you get a checkup. The doctor's going to take a look at what symptoms you have, and then based on the symptoms, probably going to give you a prescription or give you some type of physical therapy activities to do that are hopefully going to help your medical situation. Personally, for me, in 1996, I started developing pain in my foot. And I went to see a physician and was told, well, you've got gout. Well, I had pain in my ankle. It was more like a twisted ankle. Definitely, if you're familiar with gout, nothing in the joint. Toe wasn't inflamed. There was no inflamed skin or fever, hot to the touch, swelling, none of that. But yet the doctor was sure that this was gout. So for 10 years and through multiple doctors, I was consistently diagnosed with gout. About 5 years in to this pain in my feet that started moving into both feet and then into my knees and various joints, I started to see psoriasis on my elbows. And I remember seeing an internet ad or article that made me wonder, well, could I have psoriatic arthritis? And I asked the doctors, I said, absolutely not. You don't have psoriatic arthritis. That just can't happen. Less than 2% of the population has it. The probability of you having that is really, really low. You've got gout, just stick with the medication and move on. So for 10 years, this went on. I'm taking the medication, spending the money, experiencing the pain. The pain is getting worse. It's moving into multiple joints at a time until one day 7 joints are inflamed at once and I land in the hospital. At that time, now this is 10 years down the road, at that time I got to see a specialist. And within 15 minutes, that individual diagnosed me with, guess what? Psoriatic arthritis. And so they started me on that treatment, which immediately began to help. Psoriasis went away. I quit having the flare-ups in the joints, but then I had some other symptoms that tended to persist. So now another 10 years down the road, which was just back in 2016, well, over the last 10 years, I'd had various cysts growing in certain joints, causing problems with my feet and hands. And so I go to see another doctor who's going to try to remove some of these cysts, and they analyze the cysts after they've been removed, and it's like, hey, you have gouty arthritis. Well, it's like, wait a minute, I've already been diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. It's like, well, you have psoriatic arthritis, but you also have gouty arthritis. So if you can imagine, it's been 20 years. The first 10 years was misdiagnosed, spent money, spent time, spent pain, energy, and effort taking the wrong medication, only to find out 10 years later, oh, misdiagnosis, here's what the problem is. Well, another 10 years down the road, only to discover, well, we only really diagnosed half the problem. You really have two problems. And so now we've got to readjust the treatment. Well, what does that all mean to the city? We want to come into the city and we want to understand how the city operates before we try to put these goals and objectives in place. And you don't want to be 5, 10 years down the road finding out you got the wrong diagnosis and you have the wrong interventions and they're not working, and the city, the organization is not functioning the way it was intended. It's not growing the way it was intended. It's not gaining efficiency the way it was intended. So in our organization, industrial organizational psychology, we're kind of the specialists. You're not having to wait 10 years down the road. You're getting the specialist now. And so we want to come in and take a look at your organization and how it operates. And so really the things we're going to talk about today very quickly are a performance analysis and a needs analysis, how we use those, and then that we will also have to, how we will actually gather that information. And then we're going to talk about key performance indicators that the city will be able to look at and know, hey, are we doing good? Are we doing bad? Are we making improvements or are we not? So that's really, in short, a quick agenda of what we want to discuss: performance analysis, needs analysis, how we're going to gather data, and some key performance indicators that we can look at throughout the process. So the first two things are the performance analysis and the needs analysis, and they're kind of the same and yet different. Performance analysis, we really want to look at how people in the organization work. And human error is a big deal. Human performance is a big deal. If you look at human error, research shows that humans make anywhere from 15 to 11 to 15 errors per hour. 11 to 15 errors per hour. So if you've just got 10 people in your organization, that's anywhere from 110 to 150 errors every hour. And you figure across an 8-hour workday, that's a lot of error. And so there is inefficiency, there are errors, mistakes. There's simply human nature that gets involved when people are involved in any type of business. So we want to understand the human element that's involved with the city and how they perform. We also want to understand in the needs analysis, right, what does the city really need to have effective, efficient, reliable service, and to be able to look into the future. You wanted to look and see, well, what do you really need 5 years down the road? What are you going to need 10 years down the road? So we really want to look at, before we can figure out where we're going to go, we need to understand where we're at. And some examples that we can talk about, but when you talk about human performance, and one of the things that comes to my mind with city services is route efficiencies. You've got trucks on the street that are collecting waste. How efficient are those routes? It may be if it's an individual choosing his own route and somehow he winds up at his own house at noon for lunch every day, and then he can get in a 20-minute power nap. Well, that's great if it's planned, but are there route inefficiencies that can be improved? Now that program actually might be great if you can arrange a route so that individuals are at home for lunch and you give them a little power nap. There's been studies that show that individuals that get to take a nap in the middle of the day are more effective or more efficient. But is that something planned? Is that something that the organization wants to do? And when you're talking about the vehicles in your organization, you have a fleet of trucks. How many trucks do you have? If you only have 10 trucks and 2 of them are down, one's been in an accident, one is having a mechanical problem, well, 20% of your fleet is already out of commission. Can you still maintain your service? Can you still maintain reliability? Can you still be effective if you lose 20% of your fleet? And then you compare that with, well, how many other types of city vehicles do we have around the city? And I don't know what that answer is. I can tell you in the state of Illinois, where the government is way over their budget and out of control, they have 187,000 vehicles. And I can promise you those aren't all for plowing snow. There's a lot of state vehicles that employees just use to go back and forth to work. Is that something that's really necessary, especially when you don't have a budget to meet it? So we want to look at those types of things within the city, how that fleet is organized. What are we really spending money on? Do we have a preventive maintenance plan in place to make sure that our vehicles stay on the road and so that they're effective and that they're efficient? And when you're looking at employee performance, we will have to look at, how are you doing employee reviews? Are you doing an annual review? Are you doing quarterly reviews? The annual review came up with in the 1960s as the human resources I'll say a perk, if you will, to keep people to stay long term with an organization. Well, that's probably 60 years ago now, and our work climate, the environmental climate we're in, the work environment that we're in, that's really not the way businesses are set up anymore. And it's a lot more effective to do a quarterly review, for example, where you're keeping that bonus, whatever it is. Some of that money might be at risk. Some of that money they may be able to make extra. It's up every quarter versus just waiting for one payout at the end of the year. And you're getting to talk to the employee on a quarterly basis, which actually increases employee engagement. Research has shown that employees want to be talking with managers. They want to understand what their future looks like. They want to understand where they can possibly go with the company. So you're going to increase employee engagement by having quarterly reviews, but you're going to be able to put that money, that bonus money, to more effective use, right? On how much that employee can gain extra or how much might be at loss based on whether or not the employee are meeting those goals. So we want to look at how employee reviews are performed. We also just want to look at regarding your needs analysis. What does the city need? Again, in 1952, researchers pretty much thought if there were inefficiencies or if there were problems within any organization, they were generally associated with training, either poor training or a lack of training. So it initially came out in 1952 as a training needs analysis. That was the assumption. If something went wrong, geez, you got to have more training. In the 1980s, researchers started changing their minds a little bit and saying, hey, it's not just about training. There is the human element involved. There's human nature. There are mistakes. There's human error. There's that side, the human side of the equation. And then there are also what's called latent organizational weaknesses. And a latent organizational weakness is really a programmatic weakness. It might be a procedure, it might be a policy, it might be a process that has some type of weakness or some negative effect on the organization. One that just jumps to my mind are organizations that don't keep up with technology. I know organizations within the city where I live, they still send out the water bill by mail. They wait for you to send in a check by mail. Then they send that mail or that check to the bank by mail, or they deposit it. And so it takes a long period of time to get the payment information out to the citizens and the city, then to get that payment back, and then to get it processed. Where technology exists now, that people can go online, make the payment, you can have the money withdrawn out of their account within 48 hours, and it's all tracked electronically. There's no reason to still be using manual systems to process utility payments, to process payroll. So do you have those types of weaknesses in the organization where maybe we haven't kept up with technology to make sure we're doing the best we can do with what we have? Now, when we start trying to look at all these different areas, we're going to have to collect information. And there's really 4 ways that we can do that. One is through field observations. We actually go out in the field with your employees, and we just go along with them for a day, watching how they do their job. That's going to be individuals that are driving trucks, individuals that are manning stations throughout the city, construction organizations that are going out to fix utility issues, whether it's a water main break or an electrical utility issue, maybe sitting in with admin on watching how that goes, how things go in the office. Also doing interviews with employees and with management, seeing how what their perceptions are on the work that they do and how it's received and that type of thing. We're also going to, we can do look at employee reviews. We want to look at employee records on how employees have performed. Do you have a good employee job fit? That's another aspect that contributes to employee satisfaction. Does the employee really do well at the job that you chose them to do? Do you have the right athlete, for the position? For example, I know one organization that just hired an admin, and the individual didn't know how to use Microsoft Office. Now, you would think for an executive administrative assistant that they would know how to use Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, just some basic things. Well, this person didn't. And I would say, in my opinion, that person was probably not the right fit for that job, because now we're going to have to put in additional training, right? Spend additional funds to get this employee up to speed where we can actually use them functionally, and they can actually contribute to what we're doing as a business. So we want to look at, key positions in management, your supervision out in the field. Are these individuals really trained to do what you're asking them to do? We want to, have those types of considerations. So we will look at field observations. We will look at archive data, such as employee reviews that you have in place. Another way we can get information is through surveys where you should have a system already set up within the city, and if not, this is one of the things we will work on. One of our goals with the business strategy is to set up an electronic system so that you can receive information quickly through the internet, whether it's a 1-800 number that people call, or they can get on their computer and get on your website and send a quick email. But a quick way to tell you, hey, when something has gone wrong, how fast do we respond? We can keep track of, how many water main breaks are there in certain areas, throughout the year. How many electrical utility issues do we have throughout the year? How many waste collection issues do we have throughout the year? And if you want to get information from the citizens to find out how satisfied they are, or to find out if there are deficiencies in our program, we want to be able to give the citizens of Creswell an easy way to get their information to the city so that we can evaluate it and that we can course correct. And that's going to be through using electronic processes such as databases, working through the cloud type, those types of solutions, and using those technology, right, to be able to get that information to the organization quickly, for the organization to be able to respond quickly, and for us to also have that data so we can look back in a year or 6 months or 2 years or 5 years, whatever framework we want to use to determine how we're actually doing. And then once we have all that information, and once we've evaluated their performance, any kind of performance gaps that might need improvements, when we've checked out the needs analysis to understand, well, what does the city really need to make it to the next 5 years, next 10 years, at that point, we can start developing SMART goals and SMART objectives. But these are specific, measurable, actionable, they're realistic, they're time bound. These are goals, objectives that are actually going to get the work done. And along with that, we will develop key performance indicators. And I can't tell you what those indicators are at this moment. What I can tell you is that we have to look at the processes you have in place and how you measure effectiveness. And we may have to develop new ways to measure effectiveness, but we will take those measures and make performance indicators out of them. So again, you can look at them on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, an annual basis, and know how far, have you made any improvements? Have you stayed neutral? Have you actually backed up? These are the things that really have to be done on the front end before we can sit down and really develop a strong strategic business plan. Before we put down where we want to go, we have to really understand where we are. We have to do that, that performance analysis or that needs analysis, just like going to the doctor to get an exam. What are our symptoms and what are the right things? We don't want to misdiagnose, what's going on with the organization. We want to have the right information, be able to provide the right prescription, or in our case, industrial and organizational psychology, the right intervention, so that we can meet your goals and objectives. We want to be able to get data and look at multiple sources of data, be able to get that information from you, the client, and from the citizens of Creswell. And then once we have all that together, again, we want to develop those key performance indicators. So if you decide to bring DTS Global into your ranks, if you will, we're looking forward to working with you closely, to collaborating with you, to really putting this plan into action to get that information for the city and to start working on a strong plan, develop a strong plan that's going to ensure your reliability of your resources and your services to your city for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years. I do thank you for your time and consideration today, and now we'll be taking questions. Thank you.